In the second of 3 episodes of Later with Bob Costas, this one had aired April 25th, 1991, actor Robert Duvall discusses Tender Mercies, in which he insisted on singing and performing the role. Talks about his preparation for that, a hold up in a hotel in New York City for a few months, playing guitar and listening to Lefty Fritzell and people like that. And he talks about Lonesome Dove and the Great Santini, which is a great father-son conflict film, and moving film. Let's just say a moving film. Duvall talks about the process of preparing for roles and really getting into them. And it seemed like Santini was one he didn't have to get into. He went off life experience. And he also talks about his disdain for critics, especially Pauline Kael. He said her go off with her hippie husband, so he definitely doesn't have a great opinion of her. But critics he deemed as simply no better than the next door neighbor's opinion. They just know how to write. So definitely an opinionated man, an interesting man, and he and Costas had a great conversation. And again, this is the second of 3 episodes, so you know when Bob sits down and they talk for an hour and a half straight, they're grooving.
Thanks for staying up later. This is night 2 with Robert Duvall. We hope you were able to be with us last night, because we can't rewind and go over that territory again. We got to plow straight ahead. You've been nominated for an Academy Award 4 times. You won for Tender Mercies. There was an interesting clause in your contract as you played the washed up or seemingly washed up country singer. You demanded or insisted that you sing the songs yourself.
Well, yeah, I felt that if I'm going to do a part like that, I might as well do that, since I'd done a little of that throughout my life, you know, and that's one of the reasons I wanted to do it. And I just sensed, and maybe I was warned, that at times they do dub somebody else's voice into yours, like a big name or something. And I just wanted to make sure that I was covered that way, because why do the part if you don't do it yourself?
Here's a quote from Bruce Beresford, who directed Tender Mercies. I found it uncanny, even creepy the first time. He is the character. He's not Duvall at all. You need only look into his eyes. It's unnerving, the change. A lot of actors impersonate people, adopt mannerisms, have technical tricks. But Bob Duvall becomes what he's doing. Now, obviously, it's a very appreciative statement. Yeah. Is it 100% accurate, do you think?
Well, I think I don't know if that's true with every part. Probably not. I mean, with this part, I think I beat it in or something, because there was a connection. I think I connect with Horton Foote's material. So I think this was maybe one of my better parts. I'm not so sure that's true every time out, believe me. But I appreciate Bruce saying that. We had our differences, but he's a talented guy. I love what he did in Driving Miss Daisy. I just think, and I'm glad he did a good job with that. And I appreciate that he said that, because you know, I love that part, and I like doing Horton Foote's material.
Everybody talks about your preparation. Is there something about the way you approach it that you think is different than other actors?
No, I don't think I prepare any more than maybe certain other actors. I don't know how they work. I mean, I think certain projects, certain parts, you prepare more than others, you know, and sometimes you don't have time to prepare, so you just start winging it. Sometimes when you wing it, it goes as good as if you'd done all this month of preparation. Because once you come to doing it, you have to throw it away anyway. Just go like we're going, one-to-one, into the other guy's eye and just talk and listen, and talk. But sometimes you do more than others. But I don't do. I think that's been overemphasized. I know when I did. It was interesting, because when I did well, Tender Mercies, I sang in the clubs down around Ennis, Texas, and I was renting a hotel room at the Mayflower Hotel in New York. I was living there for about 6 months. So every night I'd just play a little with my guitar and sing, and listen to certain records of Lefty Frizzell and Merle Haggard, some of the old guys, just to kind of get into it. But I didn't. Certain accent work. We went over to East Texas to get some, so there was specific work done. When I did Lonesome Dove, I didn't. The material helped me a lot, and I remember 3 of us drove way over to West Texas the middle of nowhere and looked up old Sammy Baugh,
Yeah,
the old
football player.
quarterback for the Washington Redskins. Well, if ever there was a Texas Ranger, it's Sammy Baugh. I mean, he gave me things, the way he talked with his hands, the way he said, when I threw that ball into the guy, and I just was like mesmerized by the guy. We sat there for 2 hours, and when we left, I still don't think he knows who we were. One of the guys we were with had played with him, kept calling him Coach, but I don't think he recognized him. He was 70, not senile, but just straight, still looked like a champion. And I got some nice little things just watching a true guy from life that could have been a Texas Ranger, almost from another era. And I had seen him play when I was a kid, so he was like a hero. So, you know, things can happen quickly. And The Godfather, like Coppola said, well, you know, I hear this family, you're like Nixon, it's like a political family, it's this, it's that. And I said, what is it? I don't know, I don't understand it. And some guy told me, a friend of mine from East Harlem, that he had known a big crime boss up there that was very respected and very feared. But there was only one guy that could, like, nobody could go near him. Like, one guy could hold his coat, light his cigarette for him, maybe almost touch him. It's like a Secret Service man. And he had great respect for this older, aging Don. This is in real life. So just that one description gave me just about everything I needed for Tom Hagen. So that wasn't a lot of, like, torturous research to dig, you know. So that one little sentence he told me, like, was very enlightening and, like, uplifting and gave me a lot.
I read somewhere that you walked out of The Grapes of Wrath.
Well, I showed it once. I went to watch it on tape, and I didn't think it was a great. I mean, maybe they say, but that was then and this is now, but and then they say, well, the old movies were so great. I'm sure John Ford was a great director. You know, I don't know a lot about old movies. Some I do. I watched it just to, I was trying to find something out. And I was watching a tape, really, not in the theater, and about halfway through, I didn't think it was that great. I think that it was a little caricaturish, and maybe that's the way they did it in those days. But don't say movies were great then and excuse them on the other hand.
So the people that you had met from Oklahoma didn't sound like or
No
act
way.
like those guys.
Believe me, no. Believe me.
So if you're looking to research and use film, maybe you're better off getting newsreel film or a documentary.
Well, Brando
as
used to watch
opposed
Candid Camera. I mean, that's terrific. You either go to documentaries or real life. I once worked with a guy who said, now in this movie I want you to kind of walk like Bogart, but also like this French actor. I said, hey, wait a minute. Let me do it. I don't try to imitate other actors. I mean, what's that about? You know, it's tough enough that art imitates life, but it should be. The art doesn't imitate art. You know, you try to go to the real thing. I mean, sometimes you're more successful than others, but at least you try that. People say you got to be bigger than life. There's nothing in this world bigger than life. Some people's personalities appear as if they're bigger than life. But if you take selections from life and rearrange them in your work or whatever, to some it may appear as if it's bigger than life. But, I mean, nothing can be bigger than life. And a lot of times when people try to be bigger than life, then they push. And they begin to act, and they grind, you know, it becomes too much. Nothing can be bigger than life to me. I think you should try to make it like life. Your selections to put into that, to put into the pot, emotion-wise, you better be in touch with yourself in a relaxed way. If you have to find the emotional line of a character and put forth certain emotional demands that you think the script calls for. And that's what I look in actors, you know, that if they can meet the emotional demand. I can see actors up there going for emotion, then they'll back up from it. They can't make it. Other actors can't. You know, it's like separating the men from the boys. And I think separate the men from the boys, ultimately, is in the emotional life of the character. Is how well an actor can attain that emotional life. And I think it's those who really do it, who really look to life as their guide, and not to certain fiction, other films, or
The scene everybody remembers from The Great Santini, at least the one they think of first, is the basketball scene.
Right.
With your son, who's played by Michael O'Keefe.
Right. Where
Where you're just bullying the hell out of him.
Yeah, I remember that. It was a nice scene to do. It's been so long, but it was an interesting scene, you know, kind of externalized the maybe wrong kind of passion he had for what he wanted his son to do and become and grow into. You know, it's like too much.
What in your own experience did you draw on to play this guy who had been this tremendous military man, and now he just can't reconcile himself to a peacetime situation, and he carries it over in his relationship with his family? He's got to be so domineering and everything.
Well, I think, I don't really know. My father was a professional military man, and we had a transient life like that. We moved around a lot, but my dad was more quiet, and he didn't talk about it. He wasn't loud and boisterous like that. I just kind of went from my instinct and what certain special service officers I'd seen when I was in the service, and it was a good script, and I kind of went with my instincts, and also certain people I met around me, certain Marines, but kind of went just from what I felt at the time.
When you do a movie like that, and it's so well received on both levels, critically and popularly, you hear from a lot of people who said, you know, that really got to me because in some way it reminded me of my own relationship with my father.
A lot of people said their father was just like that, and on the other hand, they said what a monster he was, and yet a lot of people said it was like my father. And, you know, I contend that the guy, he cared, or he wouldn't have made the noise he made. At least he cared. His style was not so great in showing how he felt about his children, but at least he cared. And a lot of people do say my father was exactly like that. And maybe they had their trying times as well, but I'm sure they have their fond memories, too.
In the basketball scene, obviously he'd always beaten the son, but now the son's getting better, and he's got him that day,
yeah.
And he beats him, and Santini tries to change the rule. He tries to say you got to win by 2.
Yeah, people do that, I think. Yeah, they become like boys again, or infants. They become more infantile than their own sons. It's the competitiveness, yeah.
Come on over here. Come on, mama's boy.
Was To Kill a Mockingbird your first movie?
First feature film, yeah, it was. I'd done some television, but it was my first feature film.
Not a big speaking part,
No.
Boo
I
Radley.
had one word and they cut it. The one line was, where's my home, or which way, or something like that. They cut that, so it was nothing. There was no lines. Great part, I loved it. Great part. What a great part for a first-time film.
Boo Radley was the guy who lived in the house next door, never came out, and naturally some legend built around him, especially among the kids with their active imaginations. And then in the end, he comes out and,
they
and
thought
saves...
he was an ogre, a bad guy. He saves their lives at the end. He's a good guy. Like, you know, but they were all afraid of him and everything.
A little sort of subtle difference between how removed he was all the time and his kind of halting motion towards some sort of intimacy with the little children. You couldn't overplay it because obviously he couldn't awaken that quickly, but you had to show some little stirring.
When they opened the door and I was standing there, and then I go over to and touch, say, go ahead, touch. I have to touch the boys, like, you know, yeah. It's almost like an animal type thing. It worked nice because I remember I was relaxed. I had done enough television so I wasn't like freaked out this was my first film because it's the same procedure really. So it was like a nice, I knew it was a part that you could make points, but in a good way hopefully. I don't mean, you know, and I felt that I was okay, I was relaxed, and it didn't intimidate me. So what happened in that scene, I can remember, it felt nice, you know. It was like life a little bit.
Despite all the acclaim you've received, are you skeptical about critics in general?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I watched the critics on TV last night, these guys in the tuxedos talking. I mean, show me one critic that directed a film and I'll show you a tremendous failure. Show me one critic that wrote a great script, I'll show you a tremendous failure. Show me one critic that gave a great acting performance and I'll show you a failure. So I think it can be taken too seriously, you know. I really do. I think, was it Pauline Kael retired lately and took a parting shot at De Niro? Her limited knowledge as she rides into the sunset with her iffy husband. I mean, what is that about? You know, it's, you know, his gifts far go beyond her limited knowledge.
But that doesn't mean, just for the sake of argument, that as long as someone acknowledges that they have no right to speak contemptuously of a De Niro, that being acknowledged, they could still have a legitimate observation about him.
Absolutely, but that doesn't make it any more legitimate than my next door neighbor. Usually I think the prerequisite to being a good critic is to have a very good writing style and an opinion. But, you know, when I was a young actor and came to New York, I chose to study with Sanford Meisner. So I think Brando and guys like that, they never went to Stella Adler. Other people went to Strasberg. And if you were going to study with a woman, there's some wonderful, there was Uta Hagen, there was Stella Adler, there was Mira Rostova. These were people, you know, that were very critical, but would give credit where credit was due. But, you know, people that had practiced the craft and then were now imparting it by becoming teachers. I never heard of an actor that really went to New York and studied with Pauline Kael or whoever, or anybody. I don't think they give acting, you know, workshops or whatever. So I think you have to be careful that you can't, but these people write in print, and 50 years from now they'll see something like an indictment on, you know, concerning someone, and people say, oh, well, they must not have been very good. So I think, you know, in a way, through the written word, they get the last laugh in a way, and it's really, the qualification is not that high, really, because nobody directs, nobody acts, so I don't know how they really know.
Although I guess
we do.
To me, I think the key is, as long as you don't descend into contempt.
Well, it happens, though.
You know,
it does happen.
Of course it does, and that's what's annoying.
That's what I'm
Now,
saying.
there may be
I'm
some
saying.
individuals who are worthy of contempt,
Yeah.
but once, or deserving of contempt, but once someone has established a certain body of work and a certain level of ability, I think that their work can be fairly critiqued, and knocking opinions around is part of what makes it interesting. But they ought to be exempt from contempt, from a sneering dismissal.
Well, there's a
from
lot
somebody
of that.
in that position.
That's mainly what I'm talking about. You have to go to the best of their work. I think what somebody said, John Simon had attacked some woman's physical looks or something one
Yeah, he
time.
does that a lot.
And she poured a plate of soup over his head at Del Soma's restaurant. And you'll go, hey, you know. I mean, you know. Oh, we went to see the opening of Short Eyes one time. Eddie White, he goes downstairs, this guy, he says, I can't believe it. I'm downstairs, and Joe Papp's beating the crap out of John Simon. I went to stop the fight, and Joe Papp's secretary said, no, Mr. Simon has deserved this for a long time. So he said, I don't need to do this. I can do something else. And Joe says, do something else. You're ruining lives, you know. So I guess old Joe's pretty feisty, and then he wouldn't allow another critic to come to one of his plays, you know, because he's trying to protect the performers from much of the thing, what you're talking about, this kind of contemptuous kind of, you know, it's okay to be objective and say certain things, but they get pretty low down sometimes.
Accommodations furnished by the Universal City Hilton and Towers. Make your next stay in Los Angeles a memorable one with our spacious rooms, international cuisine, and the attention of a friendly, experienced staff.
I hope you feel the same way I do, which is that you could put up with another half hour with Robert Duvall. And so we're going to ask him to stay for another half hour after we send all of you to bed. And at some point in the very near future, show 3 will hit the airwaves. See you later.